Welcome back to We're Right Here. I'm Karen Richards with CMB Bank, and today I'm joined by Tara Sargent. Tara, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Tara is Executive Director of Leadership Washington County and is also a CMB Bank Advisory Board member, among several other boards that we'll talk about in a bit. But Tara, you've been in your role at Leadership since 2010.
Correct.
So
yes.
It's been a little bit.
Yes, 16 years.
So what first drew you to that work?
Oh gosh, I'll go back a little bit before that. Prior to this role, I was in higher education, teaching management and leadership classes, and my good fortune was I was teaching mostly adults, so not a traditional undergrad student. So that's why I pursued a doctorate in adult education, and then learning about sort of adult learning programs like Leadership Washington County. It's kind of a great fit, and I don't have to do any grading.
Yeah. And the hard part, maybe one of the worst parts of teaching.
It's not the most fun. But, and in most cases, everybody wants to be here. They've applied. Mm-hmm. They've taken the time and energy to set aside 10 months of their life to dedicate to this. So that's sort of the short answer. But I went through the program in 07, 08, and then joined a committee and then joined the board and kind of found myself in the right place at the right time, you'd say.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about that time? So when you stepped into your role as executive director, it was kind of a rocky time for leadership.
That's true.
So I guess what inspired you to step into the role that you're in? And then I want to hear about the impact that you've made in the 16 years that you've been there.
Okay. So I think the interest in the role was more, for 12 or so years, I was teaching for Mount St. Mary's University, which was in Frederick County, and then 3.5 years at Shippensburg University, which, obviously is in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity to work where I lived was, a big draw. I moved to Hagerstown in 2000, so it was a lot of years of kind of going outside the community to work, which does limit, I think, how engaged you can be where you live. Right. And I loved my experience in the leadership program. I saw the potential impact that it has on its class members, and then moving into the role as interim at first, we were on shaky financial ground for sure, like really, really tough. And I got to give a shout out to Susie Menard, who came up with our fundraiser, the Get Out of Town raffle that we continue to do today, this many years later, that really helped kind of save the program mid-year and get us through that class of 2010. It's the life of a nonprofit. I think, when the organization moved out of the chamber from being Leadership Hagerstown to Leadership Washington County, it was 06. We went right into the Great Recession. So all the best laid plans that anybody would have had, kind of get wiped away when sponsors and other community organizations who were willing to help get it off the ground as a 501c3, had to take a step back because of the recession. So, getting through those couple of years, and really I didn't become full-time until January of 2012. So that really took a good 18 months to get really on ground where we could, pay an executive director a full-time salary again. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't realize the backstory of Leadership Washington. I didn't know it was a chamber program before.
It was. Yeah. So the first 19 years, it was Leadership Hagerstown. So all of those graduates, still fondly call it that, as they should. Just like when a college changes to a university.
Right.
But then, in class 20 was the first Leadership Washington County class.
So you're headed into class 40?
We are. We I got all 35 commitment letters back. So everyone who was accepted has committed, which is always a good thing. And the next step is to get their tuition. And that's the biggest part of the commitment.
Right? So there's an interview process. So it's not just that you put your name in the hat and you're selected. It's more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we allow people to self-select themselves for the program, or, we'll take nominations from organizations. A lot of bigger organizations have an internal process now where they've got so many people who are interested that they do their own kind of interview process with graduates and then refer whoever they think the best candidate is for that year to us to apply. So, there's an application process and then the in-person interview. Which we're really glad to be back to in-person interviews.
Yeah.
When can we stop saying post-COVID? I don't know.
But 6 years out.
And then, we're really looking for people who truly have a heart for the community and they're interested in learning more and, being open-minded to learning from their peers as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a few things that you learned as a participant in the program?
Gosh, you're taking me way, way back.
Way back.
For me, having lived here for about 7 years or so, by the time I went through the program, it was really eye-opening. People who've lived here their whole lives often will say that they had no idea about certain things or,
Yeah.
were surprised by things. And for me, it was kind of like, a curtain being lifted, if you will, like just who's who. And, you feel like you can approach people who've spoken to your class, or you're more understanding of the dynamics of downtown, or back in the day when the Washington Hospital Center was becoming Meredith and where to put it, I can remember all those fights and not really understanding some of the politics behind it, some of the logistics behind it. So you really do, I think, and I hope today people feel empowered once they've gone through to say, I have a place at a table that I feel strongly about, because when you're talking about civic engagement and people giving their discretionary time and dollars in some cases, you really need to feel strongly about, where you're volunteering and who you're supporting, and making sure that that organization is doing its due diligence and having efficient governance and all that good stuff too. But, for me, it demonstrated the strength of the relationships in the class, and just that there's always more than what you see on the surface of a community.
Yeah, I would agree. So I haven't participated in Leadership Washington, but I did participate in Leadership Berkeley back in, I think it was 2014. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is just that network of people that you build, not just in your class, but in the community, like you're saying. There's so much more behind the scenes that goes on, more than you realize.
Yeah.
So give us some advice for someone that would like to participate in leadership. How about some interview skills? What are you looking for?
And not everybody loves to interview, and not everybody's a great interviewer. So we try to keep that in mind. Some people are strong introverts, and that's not necessarily where they're going to shine. And when I email the applicants and I give them advice, I always say talk to graduates, because especially the most recent, graduating class, because they've had the most recent experience, and kind of say, this is what to expect. This is, what the program's really about. Kind of dispelling that we're not a leadership skills program. So we're not teaching you conflict management or negotiation skills. This is topical, the challenges and opportunities facing Washington County on a range of issues. You're going to get some subtle team building stuff at the opening retreat, and even working on a team to plan your own program day, which, as you know, is unique to our program. That gives you some, have to work with people in industries you usually don't interact with, So that, I think those are key things, and also just, like I said before, having that interest in the community, it's, if you have no clue what we're about, that's probably a little bit of a red flag, just because, I think you should always research before you go to an interview.
Right.
This is good practice.
Right.
And really, that's it. Somebody who's willing to represent their organization well, that open-minded piece. I think one of the takeaways is always, we all get in our little bubbles in our own industry, our own organization. And when you meet these other, 35 people from all different walks of life, from all different organizations, that it is kind of like, especially as adults, I think it's hard to, get out of that. We all have our schedules, and you stick to it. You're not necessarily going to reach out to somebody from a different industry and say, let's have coffee. But now you have a friend, who's there. And
and you get those different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about community, being involved in the community, which you are very much so. And I'm probably going to miss some, but you currently serve as a member of the Hagerstown, Washington County Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, a member of the Greater Hagerstown Committee on the University System of Maryland at Hagerstown Board of Advisors, and on the Hagerstown Community College's Advisory Board for Career Programs in Accounting and Management. And these are your board seats, committee seats, and there are probably other organizations that you volunteer your time with. But how do you select the ones that you do give your time to? Because our time is so limited, and so you want to choose one that's meaningful to you.
Yeah, and, I, in full transparency, like with Greater Hagerstown and the Chamber, that's a ex officio seat, so I don't vote on anything in those organizations, but I do think it's important that Leadership Washington County is a member of both, to be aware of the issues that are going on in the Chamber. And, the Chamber and Greater Hagerstown work really closely together on the Community Coalition that sets an agenda for priorities for the legislative session each spring. I think, you're also, kind of rubbing elbows with other leaders in the community, which is also important. I get to give a report about leadership, so they get to hear what we're doing, and, sometimes that spurs an application or a sponsorship or just further interest in the program. And I think, the leaders of those organizations are doing good work and really do care about the community. And that's important. USMH and the HCC advisory boards, my background in education, I think I like hearing what's happening in education, business education, as technologies evolve, as AI evolves, just hearing from some of the professors at HCC about students submitting work and being able to tell it's AI or,
Right.
I can remember wondering, like, is this plagiarized? And, there was tools that you could use for that. But now, I think it's just a whole other level. So I appreciate being asked to serve on those boards and give input and support as I can. And I do have to be pretty selective about choosing nonprofit boards just because, I'm going out and asking for money for for leadership as a
Right.
nonprofit. But I did serve for 7 years on the YMCA board of directors, and that was nice and rewarding. That was one of my touchstones when I moved here. I joined the Y when it was still downtown, and anybody who remembers it will smile and laugh because it was, kind of a hole in the wall, and it was right before they moved to the new YMCA, which is probably getting close to 25 years old now. But that was where I met some people, first in the community, and that was really helpful and near and dear. So. I haven't really signed on to another nonprofit yet, but there's an association of leadership programs. I've been volunteering for some committees on that are a good fit for helping, Tara B and I learn more. And, they have an annual conference. So I think that's probably good for now. And leadership has some new things hatching in the next year. So my plate's pretty full.
Yeah. No more time. So you mentioned Tara B. So it's just the two of you. You guys are a small team and you're getting a lot of things done.
Right.
How heavily do you rely on your board?
Pretty heavily, as you say, we're just 2 full-time employees. So I keep the board around 20, 21, 22 people. So it's a decent sized board.
Size.
And, we have 5 committees, but we definitely consider our board a working board. So there's expectations and responsibilities that we make very clear and reiterate. I think it's way more than just having a seat. So you can say I'm on XYZ board, Fortunately, it's all graduates of the leadership program, so they get it. They understand what's important. They've had a good experience, so they want to make sure other people have a good experience. And it's meaningful to us. We ask for feedback on everything we do, every program day, every graduate event. We want to keep improving, keep seeing what people want to learn about in the community. Things are always changing, new things are happening. But yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I have been incredibly, incredibly fortunate to have people who are very dedicated, who will show up when you ask them to show up, who, just care, really do care. It's beyond check rating. It's, we're tying up the trash bags after the holiday party and taking them to the dumpster.
Yeah,
I mean, when you do events, it's all those little things that people don't see on the surface. But, that matters. It absolutely matters a lot, especially in a small organization.
Yeah, most definitely. So you mentioned, always asking your board for feedback, which made me think about our advisory board and your role there. And, we rely on that group of people to give us feedback. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? So talk a little bit about your time on a bank advisory board, because I think that was something new for you. It wasn't on your resume before. So have you learned much about community banking or seen similarities between what we do and what you do at Leadership Washington?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was a new prospect for me.
Yeah.
Still, as we've had conversations, you want to make sure that you're offering some value to your role. And it has been educational, I think, especially because I don't know that I would have necessarily understood, the community banking piece versus like the bigger banks that,
Right.
I mean, it's simple semantics, but understanding that, the accessibility of the community banks is just far and away more personal, more intimate, just, you have someone you can go to about any issue, whereas I shouldn't name names, but, some of the larger banks, just people change so much, you don't even have a point of contact anymore. And sometimes they'll move their charitable giving up to like a national level. So you're competing with whatever their territory, their region is. So they could have banks and, branches in 10 states, and they're competing for those dollars. And whereas you have a community bank who's invested in this, 2, 3 state area, then you can be much more hands-on. You can, have people come and see your program and witness what we do. And, that's been a big part of it, but also just hearing from people, different leaders within CMB, about updates on the commercial market or the residential mortgage market. Maybe I'm a big nerd, but I think it's really interesting. And even, on the investment side, what does that look like? And taking into account current events on all those levels. Excuse me. But, I enjoy learning from that. And it's, as a supporter of Leadership Washington County, it's also helpful for me to see, how much you guys try to do, how you spread those giving dollars around, and it's got to be difficult to make decisions.
Yeah,
people
it
ask.
is, because we want to say yes to everything, but we can't say yes to everything. So I'm glad that you made the comparison to a larger bank where it is spread more across the country than right here locally, and you do get a personal banker with us. Our decisions are made right here locally, and we live here and we play sports with your kids and go to church with your families, and our dollars go right back into the community. So
I mean, that's incredibly impactful, I think, because you also can get to know the organizations that you're supporting on an intimate level too, to say, I know they're doing good work, and we can put our name on that and feel good about it. I think that's really important. But I mean, I've met so many great people in roles that I wouldn't come across, in my normal dealings with CMB. So, I can remember a conversation with Dave over dinner, one of our dinners, and about AI and just how the impact to a community-sized bank, and just things that I would never come across in my own, just sort of reading the news or what have you.
Yeah, and AI for us, I mean, like what you mentioned before, it's coming and it's impacting every industry. And so for us as a smaller community bank, it's figuring out what does it mean for us, what do we do with it? We know we need to do something with it. So what does that look like for us?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have the opportunity to speak to I know you do through leadership, but to our younger up-and-coming leaders? And when you do that, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Oh, gosh, I think the older I get, the more advice I seem to have, which begins to make sense when you think back on yourself and why is everybody telling me what to do? And
like what would you tell yourself 20 years ago?
Oh, gosh, don't worry so much.
You're right.
First and foremost, that it's sort of wasted energy. But, I think one of the biggest things for me, based on my experience, is don't be afraid of the twists and turns. If you think that life should have taken these exact steps to get to this exact place, that's, it's pointless, the best laid plans and all of that. But I think if you're willing to embrace the twists and turns, and sometimes you can end up somewhere that you wouldn't have ever considered or planned, and it's even better than what you thought you had your eye on, kind of thing. And, being just constantly learning sounds a little trite, but truly the way technology is changing, I mean, you can't have a conversation without talking about AI, but being open to that learning, whether it's in your own field or just learning something else, keeping your brain open to things. And I think that then leads to open-mindedness about people and, not, I think it's so easy in this age of constant social media and people portraying their images that way to, make snap judgments about people. And if we just took a minute before we, I like to try to say to the leadership classes, let's give ourselves some grace here today. There's a lot going on personally, in the world, let's just try to keep it in this room and right here, right now. And that tends to help everybody kind of reset, and myself included, because it's easy to bring everything that's in the back of your mind in the door with you. But, I think young people have a really exciting future ahead if they're willing to embrace it, and just be open, be completely open.
When I was doing a little bit of research for this interview, I found some information, some quotes that you had given probably years ago, but I think are still so relevant. You said that your advice is always to show up to meetings that you're invited to. Sometimes, and I'll paraphrase, it may put you out of your comfort zone, but still show up.
Yeah.
And one piece of advice you gave was to take on a little bit more than you're comfortable with at the time, especially as you're kind of, beginning your career.
Yeah.
And I think that's been so true for me is I have always been, if an opportunity comes my way, I almost always say yes to it.
Yeah.
And so it made me think of that when I was reading your words there.
Yeah.
And then also the slogan for Leadership Washington County, take pride, take part, and take the lead, which I think is so fitting for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, that's sometimes people are reticent to walk into a room or sit at a table rather than sit in the back row. And I try to tell all of the leadership class members, especially once they've completed the program, you deserve and you have a seat at the table if you take it, that
take it, right.
all kinds of perspectives are needed and, just don't think that you don't belong there. I think you make that decision after you've put yourself in that place. But if you think you can make an impact and you can make a difference, or your perspective is missing, absolutely, try to make a difference. And if it's not there, if that door closes, then be open to searching for something else.
Yeah, that's such good advice.
Yeah, it's easy to give up.
Right.
And especially if you don't necessarily have people in your life who encourage you to keep going, or just don't let that get you down. Try again with this angle, kind of thing.
Have you had a mentor along the way?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. This came up recently. I can't remember who I was talking to, but at different phases in my life, I feel like I've been very fortunate. Most of the time, if I think about it, predominantly women, but I have to say when I started teaching, there were 2 male professors at Mount St. Mary's who were just absolutely over the top, welcoming, sharing resources. I was taking over some of the courses that they had taught for a long time, and they were very, very generous. But, I think I've had far more people willing to put out a hand than people who are stepping on your fingers as you're trying to climb,
Okay.
But those people who maybe I felt like they stood in the way or really truly stood in the way, I really tried to always remember, I never want to be like that. I always want to, be there for someone when people reach out, and a lot of leadership class members will reach out. They change a job and they want some advice. And I love that. I'm like, and it's so different now. Like maybe you feel the same way, but we started careers and it was like, you stay, you don't bounce around after a year or 2 or 3, you kind of stay. Maybe you're not staying 40 years, but it's put in some time. Now I give different advice to people. I think it's very, very different. Different job environment, and especially when you're in your 20s and you're not quite sure yet even where you want to land and what you want to be.
Right. You don't know when you're in your 20s, do you?
Yeah.
Which when I think back to my 20s, I probably thought I knew, but.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just, you think you've got it
all figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you like to do for fun? What are your hobbies?
I like to walk and hike. Get in a few bike rides during the spring and summer.
Okay.
I love to read fiction and nonfiction. Constantly reading something. What else do I do? I'm a bit of a political podcast junkie at the moment. That's kind of how I get my news, and it's sometimes in a more amusing way than just seeking out CNN. You find personalities that you enjoy and that sort of thing, but. And spending time with friends and family, that's always, I think, super important.
You have a favorite vacation spot?
Oh, gosh. Favorite. I grew up going to the beach. So, a beach really anywhere is kind of just feels like
same for
a big
me.
sigh of when you hear it's just seeing it. You don't even have to be on it, but seeing it is nice. So really anywhere, but also a good place, a place where you can go and hike and do some different things. So those would be my two, the mountains and the beach. Yeah, exactly.
What about favorite date night spot? If you are going out someplace local, where do you choose?
That's so funny because we've just been talking about how we don't do this very much, but we just did. There's a new restaurant called Olive and Oak.
It's so good.
Yeah, we finally got there on Friday night. So it was kind of monumental that we got ourselves out to dinner.
Yeah.
Of course, it was when the rain was, starting out.
Right.
But that's and doing that or with one other couple kind of thing, That's nice. We have our streaming shows that we watch, really
Yeah,
wait for the new season.
A lot of that with the rain over the weekend.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, it's less about the flash of what you do and that you take the time to do it, to carve out time just to look at each other rather than, what's the schedule tomorrow and what's for dinner and what's for dinner the next night.
Yeah, you get out of your normal
You have to do that
routine.
stuff. But but it's nice sometimes just to kind of quiet that.
Right. Agreed. Well, what have we missed? Anything you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
You mentioned that we were going into the 40th anniversary year. So officially that starts July 1, but of course the 40th class will begin in September. And we have some exciting things planned to celebrate. We have the kickoff for the 40th anniversary will be combined with the welcome reception for the new class. That's October 1st at the Cintas Suite at Meredith Park.
Okay,
we've had our welcome reception there for the last couple of years, and it's been a great spot, and they've been great to work with. Trying to think, there's some things we don't want to give away yet, but we will have a finale event in May of 2027, so stay tuned for more details on that.
Celebrate the 40th.
It will be at Hub City Vinyl Live. That part I can say, but more
Uh-huh.
details to follow. But just really trying to make the most of this milestone and emphasize the legacy piece that so many people have gone before to set the stage, and so many people have supported the organization over the last 39 years that, we want to both recognize the different decades, recognize, notable graduates who are still here and still doing great things in the community. So I'm excited. We had a fun year for the 30th anniversary. It's hard to believe that's, 9 years ago now.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But yeah, it is exciting, I think. And I think I've always felt like it's important to recognize milestones. You can put in the hard work, but I think it's always important to take time to celebrate, your achievements.
Sounds like you have a lot on the calendar for the upcoming year.
Yeah, it's amazing. We always have like 18 months planned.
But you have to,
You
right?
do.
Otherwise, you're kind of scrambling to get things done. But
yeah, absolutely. It'll be in a couple of months. I should probably start looking at Class 41 dates,
Yeah.
and Class 40 wouldn't have started yet. So, but
Yeah.
it's just like a school year. I'm sure like teachers do the same thing.
Right. I know you're excited for Class 40.
I am.
Although what you see on social media is every class has been the best class ever. So so I'm sure Class 40 will be.
You do hear that, yeah. And Class 39 wraps up on Thursday this week with their closing retreat. So I was saying before we got started, it's very bittersweet to say goodbye to a class, but it's so nice to have watched them come together as a group, and support each other. And there are dynamics that we often don't hear about until the closing retreat, little things that have gone on or that ways people have supported each other. And sometimes we don't find out until well after the fact. And that's the magic of working with adults is you don't have to regulate everything. You don't have to arrange every relationship, and that people can actually take the initiative and, be out there supporting their peers. And I have to say Class 39 has been stellar and, very supportive of one another.
And a plug for our CMB participant, Jake Menard. You mentioned his mom, Susie.
Absolutely.
About the fundraiser. So it's neat to kind of have that tie in there. But.
Yeah, it is. And I've had some parent-child folks now
Oh, yeah,
already.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I like to joke that if I start having grandkids, it's game over. That seems a little excessive.
That's how you know you've been there for too long.
We have a list of siblings who've gone through, husband and wives, parent-child, and that's really cool to see, that people believe enough that even if they went through 20 years ago, they encourage their kid, to go through the program. That's very meaningful to me. That speaks not only, to my tenure, but the importance of the program in general and going back to the very first class.
Right. No, I agree. Definitely shows the worth of the program.
I think so too. And, I would be remiss not to thank CMB Bank. And, I get to talk to you in person a lot, which is great. But, once a year I'm reaching out to, ask for support, and you guys have been great. And not only on a, supporting the organization, but just as a bank to work with for our organization has been wonderful.
Yeah. Happy to support.
I could list so many employees, and I go into the new branch on Pennsylvania Avenue and it's like,
everybody knows you.
So welcoming. It's just, you don't get that these days.
Thank you.
So really
happy to support it. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for us. We'll wrap up. Thanks for joining us on We're Right Here. We'll see you next time.